Iran Daily Briefing. Tuesday, April 7, 2026. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said U.S. forces are carrying out more strikes on Iran than on any previous day since the start of the war. That statement came as Tehran's deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz expired. And Iran refused. Al Jazeera is also reporting that Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant has been attacked, though that has not been independently confirmed. We'll have more on Bushehr later, once you have the full picture. Today is day 39 of US-Israeli strikes on Iran. As we've covered in previous episodes, the conflict began on February 28th, with what Sputnik reported as Operation Epic Fury. Today's episode covers three converging pressure points: the collapse of a ceasefire proposal, an escalation in strike tempo, and new reporting, unconfirmed, about a strike near a nuclear facility. Here's what you'll hear. The ceasefire proposal that Tehran rejected and what followed. The killing of the IRGC intelligence chief, with important caveats about sourcing. A strike reported at a synagogue in Tehran, where two accounts conflict, and the rescue of two American airmen over the Easter weekend. We'll close with the Bushehr nuclear plant report and what the movement of LNG tankers may or may not indicate. The central story today is the collapse of a ceasefire proposal and what has followed from it. France 24 reports that Iran and the United States received a draft proposal late Sunday calling for a 45-day ceasefire and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The proposal was brokered by Pakistan. France 24 reports Tehran rejected it. Al-Monitor, citing its own sourcing, adds detail. The proposal called for an immediate ceasefire, the lifting of Iran's effective blockade of the strait, followed by broader peace talks. Al-Monitor reports the proposal included those peace talks to follow within 15 to 20 days. That specific detail comes from Al-Monitor alone and has not been corroborated by other outlets. Iran's rejection was direct. Al Jazeera reports Tehran characterized President Trump's threats as delusional. Iran's ambassador to Pakistan, Reza Amiri Moghadam, wrote on X on Tuesday that efforts to end the war were approaching a critical, sensitive stage, language that is notably more measured than Tehran's public posture, and which Al-Monitor reports. What followed the rejection was an escalation in declared strike tempo. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said U.S. forces are carrying out more strikes on Iran than on any previous day since the start of the war. That statement, reported by Al Jazeera, came without a specific time reference in the sourcing. It is a claim about scale, not a real-time battlefield update. President Trump's public statements have grown more explicit about targets. Al Jazeera reports Trump posted on social media stating, quote, "Tuesday will be power plant day," threatening strikes on Iran's power plants. France 24 and Al Jazeera both report Trump threatened to destroy bridges and power plants if Iran did not reopen the strait. France 24 reports that when asked about the risk of committing war crimes in bombing civilian infrastructure, Trump said he was not at all concerned. BBC and NPR both report Trump threatened to take out Iran in one night if no deal was reached. Iran has not reopened the strait. Al-Monitor confirms that as of April 7th, the strait remains effectively closed. There is one additional Trump statement worth noting. Al Jazeera reports the president said the US, as the winner of the war, has a concept for charging a toll for passage through the Strait of Hormuz. That is an unusual framing. The war is ongoing, and Tehran has not responded to it specifically. What to watch? Whether any strikes on Tuesday target Iranian power generation infrastructure. That would represent a significant expansion of the targeting set and would likely trigger an immediate international response. Story 1. The killing of the IRGC intelligence chief. France 24 reported Monday that Israeli strikes killed the intelligence chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guards. France 24 did not name the individual. Two lower confidence sources go further. Breitbart News and GossipLankaNews.com both identify the officer as Brigadier General Magid Kademi, described as the head of the IRGC intelligence. That identification has not been confirmed by France 24 or any higher confidence outlet. Treat the name and rank as unconfirmed. What is reported by France 24? The killing of the IRGC intelligence chief is itself significant. Targeting senior intelligence figures is a distinct category of strike from targeting military installations. What to watch? Whether Iran's state media confirms or denies the killing, and whether Tehran names the officer, which would settle the identification question. Story 2. The synagogue strike. 2. Al Jazeera reports describe the same event differently, and the discrepancy has not been resolved. One Al Jazeera report states a US-Israeli strike caused extensive damage to a synagogue in Tehran, citing video from Mehr news agency. A separate Al Jazeera report describes the synagogue as completely destroyed. These two characterizations conflict. Extensive damage and complete destruction are not the same thing, and the two accounts have not been reconciled. What is consistent across both reports? A synagogue in Tehran was struck in what is described as a US-Israeli attack. The extent of that damage remains unclear. Al Jazeera also reports that overnight US-Israeli strikes killed 15 people across Iran. That figure has not been independently corroborated. What to watch? Whether Iranian state media or international journalists in Tehran can independently assess the synagogue's condition, which would resolve the conflicting accounts. Story 3. The rescue of 2 American airmen. DoD News reports that 2 U.S. airmen were rescued in Iran during the Easter weekend, following the shootdown of a U.S. F-15 fighter jet, which Al Monitor describes as the first crewed American warplane lost in more than 5 weeks of combat. President Trump, Defense Secretary Hegseth, and Air Force General Dan Kane, who holds the position of Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, held a White House press conference to announce the rescue. A note on the sourcing here. DoD News refers to Pete Hegseth as Secretary of War. That is the title as it appears in the DoD source. The conventional U.S. title for this position is Secretary of Defense. The script has used Defense Secretary throughout this episode as the standard title. The DoD source's use of Secretary of War in this context has not been explained or clarified by that outlet. NPR reports that Trump publicly revealed details about the rescue, details about an airman still inside Iran. NPR and Al Jazeera both report Trump then demanded that a journalist who had reported on the rescue reveal their source and threatened to jail the reporter. Al Monitor reports that Italy denied permission for U.S. military aircraft to land at the Sigonella Air Base in Sicily en route to the Middle East. Whether that denial is connected to the rescue operation is not stated in the sourcing. What to watch? Whether the second airman's status is clarified. DoD News reports 2 airmen were rescued. The sourcing does not specify whether both were recovered simultaneously or whether one remains in an uncertain situation. Story 4. Executions and domestic pressure. France 24 reports that Iran executed a 23-year-old man named Ali Fahim on Monday. He was convicted in connection with January's nationwide protests. Times of Israel reports he was hanged for an alleged attack on a Basij base. France 24 reports rights groups say Fahim and others executed in connection with the protests faced torture, unfair trials, and were denied access to legal counsel. Separately, Middle East Eye reports that Iran's judiciary chief, Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, called on Tuesday for swift prosecutions, accelerated verdicts, and executions or asset confiscations against those accused of aiding hostile actors, citing Mizan News as the original source. Also in the domestic picture, Iran International reports that Iranian security forces have not returned the body of 18-year-old executed protester Amir Hossein Hatami to his family 4 days after his execution. What to watch? Whether the judiciary chief's call for accelerated proceedings leads to additional announced executions in the coming days. Al Jazeera reports that Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant has been attacked. This has not been independently confirmed. It is a single-source report, and listeners should hold it accordingly. What adds weight to the concern, regardless of whether that specific attack occurred? Al Jazeera separately reports that the World Health Organization has warned of catastrophic risks if a radioactive release occurs from the Bushehr plant. The WHO warning is reported independently of the attack claim. On the question of the Strait of Hormuz, gcaptain.com reports that 2 liquefied natural gas tankers from Qatar appeared to be heading toward the Strait of Hormuz on April 6th. What would be the first Hormuz exit since the war began? That report comes from gcaptain.com alone, a single source, and has not been corroborated. It should be treated as unconfirmed. One additional diplomatic note. Middle East Eye reports that Malaysia's foreign ministry says Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's call with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian contributed to safe passage for a Malaysian vessel through the strait. That claim comes from the Malaysian government and has not been independently verified. Several concrete things to watch in the next 24 to 48 hours. First, Trump's stated threat that Tuesday will be power plant day. Whether US strikes on Tuesday target Iranian power generation infrastructure is the single most consequential thing to watch today. If that happens, it marks a significant escalation in targeting. Second, Iran's response. Tehran rejected the ceasefire proposal and has not reopened the strait as of this morning. Iran's ambassador to Pakistan described diplomacy as approaching a critical, sensitive stage. Watch for any follow-on diplomatic communication from Tehran, particularly through Pakistan or India, whose ambassador Iran has publicly called a potentially effective mediator. Third, the Bushehr situation. Al Jazeera's unconfirmed report of an attack on the nuclear plant, combined with the WHO's warning about radioactive release risk, makes this a watch item. Independent confirmation or denial from journalists or international monitors would significantly clarify the picture. Fourth, the LNG tanker movement. If gcaptain.com's report of 2 Qatari LNG tankers approaching the strait is confirmed by additional sources, it would be the first commercial transit since the war began, a significant development for energy markets. Fifth, the identity of the killed, the IRGC intelligence chief. Iran's state media response, or absence of response, will either confirm or leave unresolved the identification reported by lower confidence outlets. Today's briefing covered Iran's rejection of a Pakistan-brokered ceasefire proposal on day 39 of US-Israeli strikes, an escalation in declared US strike tempo, an unconfirmed report of an attack on the Bushehr nuclear plant, the killing of a senior IRGC intelligence officer, conflicting accounts of a synagogue strike in Tehran, the rescue of 2 American airmen, and continued executions connected to the January protests. We'll be back tomorrow with updates on all of these threads. If you found today's briefing valuable, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every morning.